Hello and welcome to this tutorial on the topic of Cisco API integration with Gluware, which is available within the Device Manager, and there are also a few calls integrated with OS Manager. If you are taking the Gluware test drive, you will be able to follow along with the steps shown in this session and do it in your environment as well. So let's get signed in here to Gluware. And what we're going to be covering here is that the Cisco API integration has been implemented to provide important information on your inventory of Cisco devices. So once you've added in your devices and you have Cisco devices within Gluware and you associate the Cisco API connection, you can pull things like end-of-life, end-of-sale information, SmartNet status, and probably most importantly, PSIRTs or security advisories issued on the hardware and/or operating system running on those devices. So let's check out the steps involved in setting it up. So I signed into the Gluware. Gluware brings me back to the last application I was in, which was Device Manager. But let's go to where the API connection is set up. So let's navigate into System Settings. Under System Settings, go into Organization. And this is on a per org basis. So I am in the org I'm working with here, which is my org called Test Drive for Pod 1. This is one of the pods used for the test drive. A pod is, in this case, it's just an organization. It's a multi-tenant environment with Gluware, so this is one of the tenants. And I go to Integrations. So here in Integrations, I see Setup for Cisco API Console. I need to click the box to enable it. I then insert my ID and secret information that Cisco provides, and then I can click this button here to test the API connectivity. We'll make a test call, and it was successful. So that's all it takes to set it up on the Gluware side. From the Cisco side, what you have to do is you have to have a SmartNet contract status and you have to have a login. And then you can navigate to apiconsole.cisco.com, and there are really 3 steps. You register your application, you get access tokens, and then you make API calls. So the key kind of step to it is knowing what applications or what APIs you want to have access to. And Gluware has documentation in our help, and we can provide that for you. But as you navigate into the Cisco Services APIs, this falls into the category of customer information. This is around your SmartNet status. There's inventory calls around end-of-life, end-of-sale. Product alerts are along the lines of the PSIRTs. So Cisco has different categories of APIs that you gain access to or request access to, and then Gluware will make those API calls on your behalf based on your Cisco inventory. So that is a very important step for you to have an active Cisco SmartNet contract status on at least one device and request that access to the proper APIs, get your tokens, and then you come and put them in Gluware. So once that's done and you've tested your connectivity, you're good. What you'll see in Device Manager is you can either trigger an ad hoc request to update that data, or you can schedule it and tick this box and schedule it. One point I will bring out is that Cisco does rate limit or kind of limit the amount of API calls that can be done. And each API has different limitations. You're going to have to take a look at it if you want to understand what those are. But one benefit to scheduling it is that Gluware will handle spacing out or understanding the Cisco kind of rules and get all of the calls accomplished. We'll queue the jobs and execute until all of the API calls for your devices have been completed. If you had a very large inventory, and again, I don't know the thresholds off the top of my head, but let's just say you had 5,000 devices and you trigger an update and you're sending a lot of API calls to Cisco, not all of them may complete based on their rate limiting and capacity and other constraints that are put on it. So that's one point to be aware of, and that would be probably one benefit to scheduling the API calls to ensure they take place and complete. So when you go to work with the data is there and updated. So let's move back into Device Manager here. So once your API access is set up, all you have to do is select your devices. And again, I'll select all the Cisco devices, but the other caveat I will add is that depending on the API you're working with, not all APIs support all flavors of Cisco devices. So Cisco will provide the information of exactly what APIs are covering what series of products. In this lab environment here, I have CSRs, I have a physical iOS-based switch, I have an ASA, I have a Nexus 9K type of device. So, actually all of them are virtual except for the switch. So we'll be in particular looking at the switch in this example. But once you've selected the devices within your Gluware Device Manager, there is an icon over in your actions, icon list to update support data. You want to click that, and it's going to say, hey, I'm going to take your information, send it off to a third-party API to collect that information, confirm, and it will take a few minutes here because it is making those API calls. And again, the more devices you have and where Gluware is going to handle working through the Cisco constraints. In this very small environment, we're not going to bump into any type of constraints, but we'll still take, maybe the better part of a minute or two to complete the API call and populate the data. Okay, so now the job has been complete. So now where are the results? Well, in two places. One is as you scroll to the right, what you should see are columns for contract end of life, end of sale, critical advisories, and the different levels. So you should see those. If you don't see those, I'll refer you back to the Device Explorer video, but you want to go to the settings for your Device Explorer and make sure you have those things turned on that you want to see. So all of these contract end of life, EOX, it's end of life, end of sale, critical advisories, product ID, medium advisories, high advisories, these are all the Cisco API integrations that are viewable into the grid. Now let's double click into a device here. So just for navigation purposes, I will double click on that physical switch because those are going to have the most information. So my views on my top panel, once I've double clicked into a device here like this physical switch, I can view this icon here, which is the end of life, end of sale data. So I can see that there is an end of sale announced for this date. There's an end of software. So these dates have been provided, and that's October of this year that this device goes end of sale. So I want to be conscious of that if I'm capacity planning or planning with purchasing and when I need to replace devices. End of sale is one thing, but going out of software maintenance is a much bigger issue, right? So you want to be conscious of your inventory and what the status of when things are going end of life, end of sale. So that information is there for you and collected on the hardware in your lab. Again, all of the other items in this lab happen to be virtual, so you're not going to see that type of data. Next, I'm going to skip advisories for last, but I'm going to navigate into this for the SmartNet contract status, and I can see, yes, there is an active status, and I have my service number, and I have my warranty expiration. So again, if you are looking at keeping track of inventory and if things are covered under your SmartNet contract status and all that, this is very useful. I will tell you that there is another video we're going to share shortly here. By the time you're watching this, it should be available, which is we actually can interrogate the Cisco devices for the Cisco licensing information, and that's available through the data exporter. So we will see that in a follow-up video, but we have two reports you can generate for Cisco devices: a hardware inventory detail, which is very low-level details on your hardware, and secondly, the Cisco licensing report, where we're looking at all the various licensing information, what's enabled. So let's go into the third and final view in the integration of the APIs here, and that's the advisory summary. So this is probably the most important, is being aware of the PSIRTs that have been issued on your device and taking a look through, especially the highs and probably at least the mediums. Generally there could be lows as well. But you definitely want an awareness of the highs and understand if, based on what you're reading, you could be vulnerable to it. So when you're vulnerable, there are generally, a few different courses of action. One course of action is the vulnerability could indicate there's a fix in a newer version of OS. Therefore, you can plan an OS upgrade to work through the fix. The other one would be oftentimes there's configuration workarounds. So if maybe you have something turned on in your configuration that you don't need or are not using, simply turning it off will limit your exposure. Or sometimes there's a security workaround, like applying an access list or some other mechanism to work through it. So anyone that is working on a Cisco network should be probably well aware of, or really any vendor, of the vendor, how they communicate advisories, and then essentially scrubbing those advisories to understand how you're affected. And then with Gluware, you can plan your course of action. You can, if you want to check for these things, their existence in your network, you can do things like ad hoc query, which we've already shown, or you can go and do things like audit, and you can audit your network to see if those conditions exist. And you can move on into config modeling, where you can implement configuration and work around or work through any kind of advisory. And of course, OS Manager, you can implement operating system upgrades. So that's really the summary here on the Cisco API integration, specifically here in Device Manager, where you have that end-of-life, end-of-sale, SmartNet contract status, and security advisories. And then we're not going to show it here, but as we show the demonstration of OS Manager is executing a few API calls to Cisco as well when you're doing upgrades on Cisco. One is it's checking the compatibility of the image with the hardware to ensure that you're trying to stage an image on hardware that's compatible. And second is Gluware pulls the checksum value on the image from Cisco, so that when we transfer the image on the device, we can compare that checksum and ensure the image is whole once the transfer has been done. So those are also useful integrations. So at that point, this concludes the tutorial on the Cisco API integrations. Thank you.